What's up, Father Ryan?
Hey, Eric.
Nice to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Glad you could do this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your recent tournament and a couple other things. Most people would be kind of surprised to see that like a Catholic priest would be practicing the art of jiu-jitsu, which is involves extending people's limbs and choking people. Do you want to explain why you do this kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I wrestled in high school, and I've always enjoyed just being athletic and just really the art of grappling, trying to find out best ways, and I think competition is healthy, and I think there's definitely an art to it, in terms of, finding good techniques and having control of your own body, so I think as long as it's done friendly and, I'm not out to hurt or do violence to a person, but I do think it's healthy, and it's healthy that we are active and that we have healthy competition in our lives.
So so you think competition in general is good for people?
Yeah, I mean, in life we're supposed to live out a spirit of excellence, and I think that means, mental excellence. We should seek the truth with our minds. That means, spiritual excellence and excellence in relationships. We should try to live that truth in relationship to each other, and, I believe also with God well. And that also means physical excellence. We need, part of even being a priest. I mean, we're all called to live balanced lives. So I think in terms of my hobbies and leisures, I need to have things that I'm doing that create healthy distraction from other things. Obviously, I don't want to be always consumed in my work. I want to have a good social life, and I need to have a good level of physical activity to be healthy, and ultimately, I think to have the power or the strength to serve. I think this is something that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu helps me to do, and I'm very thankful for that.
Can we, I failed to do like a brief introduction. Mm-hmm. So you are Father Ryan, and you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Father Ryan Hofford, and I'm here at St. Jude as what's called a parochial vicar or an assistant pastor. Parochial means parish, vicar means, because of the word vicarious, I serve at the power of someone else. And so really the pastor here is Father Trey. And so I've just been ordained, just had my 2-year anniversary on May 27th. And so I'm a fairly new priest in that regards. And so I will be here. I was at another assignment at Holy Family in Port Allen, and outside of Baton Rouge in Louisiana. And so I will do another year here, and then I'm assigned.
And then you're what, assigned?
Yeah, and then it might move me elsewhere. In terms of wherever I go, it really depends on what the needs of the Diocese of Baton Rouge, which is a geographical area that encompasses the whole region, not just the city. And really at the leisure of the bishop, who's my superior, and knowing the needs, they basically send me wherever I would be most helpful.
Mm. And you said you got into jiu-jitsu because you did wrestling in high school.
Yeah.
And then actually later I wanted to touch on, so you have a background, a degree in philosophy?
Yeah, I have a degree in philosophy, a degree in literature, and a master's in theology.
You think that helps you with your Bible studies?
Yeah, actually it's a requirement that anyone who studies theology that we would first have a foundation in philosophy. And so if you already have a degree, you might do a 2-year program where you do pre-theology, which is just philosophy courses. But for me, I have a 4-year degree in philosophy. And so the idea is that philosophy gives us the intellectual tools and logical tools to think about our human experience, to reflect on what it means to be human, what it means to be a part of reality, how do we know what we know, and so I think that's really integral into the way we think about theology, because ultimately when we think about the content of our faith, we want to be able to make sure we're thinking about this logically, that it's rooted in our experience, and that it makes sense of our humanity.
Mm. So did you grow up in the Catholic faith?
I was baptized as a child, and my parents kind of, went to church off and on. They stopped going to church by the time I hit junior high. I went through a period of weak atheism or agnosticism. When I got to high school, I became, it was actually not Catholic church. I was actually anti-Catholic for a little while, different various Christian groups that I became a part of. And from that, I had a sense of community, a love of God, a love of Scripture, and slowly, during the course of high school, made my way back to the Catholic Church. But it's It's like most roads, it's not. It's complicated.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. That's great. So you got into jiu-jitsu, and you just did a tournament recently, which we're gonna show footage of. Can you talk about your feelings about going into that, or like why you feel competition is important for people? Maybe I know you just touched on that a little bit.
Well, I know for myself a few years ago, I ultimately want to be healthy to serve, and so I was serving prior to going to the priesthood. I was a teacher for a number of years, and I was also, during that time, I became my sister's legal guardian. I took guardianship of her and helped her put her through high school, and and one of the things I realized is I want to spend the rest of my life serving others, serving family, serving the church, serving God, and growing my ability to do that well. In seminary, I had gotten to the point where my health was so bad. I was at 340 pounds. I got diagnosed with diabetes, and I could feel my body just kind of shutting down. I was just like, I need to, and I was neglecting that, I was neglecting some of the physical health and healthy diet, and so I really, kind of having that diagnosis, I was like, and so I started eating well, and I lost, over 100 pounds, and especially now that I was in my priesthood, I was like, I need some type of physical activity. I've always enjoyed grappling, and so I've always wanted to join a jiu-jitsu gym, but kind of looked around, and so really thankful to find the one that we both belong to, with Josh Mancuso and Eric Rapasso, and I'm really thankful for the community they have there, which is competitive. I feel like people are looking out for each other's well-being, and ultimately one of the reasons why I started competing. I mean, even I've done 4 tournaments, and I just started late August, early September last year, and I just realized out the gate, there's something about competition that it gives you a goal. It helps you kind of focus on, training for a particular thing, and it's fun. I mean, I think one of the things that we kind of miss out on, a part of humanity, is having things in our lives that involve play, that involve a certain lightheartedness, and so I think to be able to go into the gym or go into a tournament and, and just give it your all and do something that's fun and something that's engaging intellectually, physically, emotionally, psychologically, this is something that helps us exercise the entire person in a way that helps us be more holistic and ultimately have self-control, have strength, and that can be ordered to our other vocations in life and passions. For me, which is to serve, which is to love, and to be. In order to do that, I need to be healthy in order to do that.
So in a sense, you're saying like being healthy helps you, or having a practice like jiu-jitsu or a physical practice in general makes you more effective in the world.
Yeah. Well, even if you look at the word virtue, it comes from, it means power, right? Virtus, it means the power to do something. And so when you think about in the ethical life, right, Aristotle, virtue is something that gives us the power to live a good life. But in order to have power, you have to have practice, you have to have exercise. And so one of the things I see about, doing any type of physical activity, ultimately you're building a certain physical power. It requires self-control, self-discipline, self-knowledge to be able how to, especially in jiu-jitsu, how do I use my body? How do I understand my body? How do I understand where this other person is coming from, and to be able to, apply what I know and my body type and what I'm capable of with what they know and they're capable of. And so I think there's something about that good practice and good physical practice and something like jiu-jitsu builds up a certain self-control, a certain quality of discipline that benefits you, but it benefits you holistically in your life as well.
More recently with me, I have got into I read one of Jordan Peterson's books.
Okay.
And one of the things he says, and I hadn't seen anybody else quote it, but I quoted it because I read it in his book, and he basically said, if you are incapable of cruelty, you are absolutely a victim of anyone who is. And that also brings me to his other quote that, his reinterpretation of the meek shall inherit the earth. And he says that he researched the word meek and said that the original translation means one that has weapons and knows how to use them, or you could say is dangerous but has weapons that knows how to use them but keeps them sheathed, or basically someone who is dangerous. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
It's interesting because another word for meek is gentle. Right, and one of the things that jiu-jitsu is called is
The gentle art.
And I think a part of that is a certain proportionality. I want to use as much force necessary to defend myself, but I don't want to be excessive.
Of course, yeah.
Right, and so when I think about, even for me as a priest, like I don't want to hurt people, right? That's not the goal. The goal is not violence. The goal is to protect, is to uphold and respect and uphold dignity. And so one of the things I think people, even in Christianity, this has become distorted, because I think when you look at blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, and with all the Beatitudes, it's actually challenging a worldly sense, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who aren't addicted to good feelings. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who aren't addicted to wealth. Blessed are those who weep and mourn, who aren't addicted to good feelings. Blessed are the meek, those who aren't addicted to power, right? And so when you think about how people use power in order for violence, in order to get back, in order to be excessively vengeful, like you wrong me, you look at me wrong, I'm going to punch you in the face, and that's
exactly.
That's an abuse of power. And so we get into this is how do we use power appropriately, and we need meekness. And so it's not that we're not powerful. It's just that we want to order our power towards love, towards goodness, towards truth, towards the dignity of the person.
Exactly.
And so, even to go this, turn the other cheek. Yeah. Many people think that's an excuse to allow someone to be abusive towards you. No. Actually, there's a certain indignation in that. Like I'm gonna insult you, and I'm gonna stand my ground. I'm not going to acquiesce. I'm not going to back down to the violence of the oppressor. I'm going to stand my ground. You are not going to abuse me, and I'm not going to allow my dignity to be affected. There's a Father Robert Barron who actually did an interview with Peterson. I don't know if you're familiar with that. He's actually Bishop Robert Barron.
I might have seen it.
But he does this thing on the Beatitudes, and he talks about how Mother Teresa, right? There's a story of her approaching this bakery, and there's this kid who's hungry, and the kid, obviously is starving. So she goes to, hey, could you give the child something to eat? And then he says the baker basically spits in her face, and she just looks at him. She just says, thank you for that. Now how about something for the child, right? She doesn't. Her turning the other cheek wasn't this certain sense of cowarding away, but there's a holy boldness that I'm going to stand my ground, and I'm not going to give in to these power dynamics. And I'm going to reveal to you a better way, a merciful way. And so I really think meekness is a certain sense of, it doesn't mean I'm not powerful, it doesn't mean I have strength. It's about how do I use my strength.
That's good. I appreciate that. That's great.
I think this is the reason why something like jiu-jitsu is important, because it really puts a lot of emphasis on how do I neutralize a person without hurting them.
Yeah.
And you see that even in the art of practicing it, I don't want to, and when I'm doing this move, I want to use enough force, but not too much and not too little. I want to use as much as it takes, but I'm not out to hurt the person.
Yeah, of course.
And so therefore, when I'm applying a technique, how can I get the advantage without hurting them? Without being excessive.
Yeah, and that's actually what made me love it, is because, I was in class once when I first started, and the instructor was like, does anybody have any good fight stories in here? And 2 people raised their hand, and both of their stories were almost exactly the same, in a sense of one of them got in between 2 people, and another one, it was like a one-on-one thing. And as soon as they put their hands on them and controlled the person, they didn't even have to put a choke on. They didn't put an arm bar on. They didn't have to do anything. Yeah. All they did was control them. And they were they felt helpless for a second. And they were like, cool, I'm cool. And then it happened to me. The same thing happened to me. I was biking in New York. A car pulls up behind me. I'm on a one way. And the street's kind of tight, but I can get over, 30 yards ahead of me. But this car was just bom, 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 bom. And he was pretty ridiculous. And part of me, just because he was so ridiculous, made me want to stand my ground even more.
Yeah.
Not that I talked, I went zen. I just was whatever. I was just give me 1 second. I'm not rushing. I can get over in a second. And as soon as he could get right next to me, he had his finger he could practically touch me out the window. And he's like, you're supposed to yield to cars. And I calmly looked at him and said, no, actually, I have every right to the road that you do. He ends up sideswiping me because he was so upset. I put my shoulder into it and stayed up. He had his wife and his kid in the car.
Sideswiping you with his family.
Yeah, he had his family in the car, sideswiping me. But he could only sideswipe me so far because he would have hit other cars that were parked on the side, right? So I just stayed up, and that pissed him off even more. So eventually, I just put my brakes on, let him go in front of me.
Yep.
Now he's in front of me, and he just keeps peering at me like he's trying to burn a hole through me through his mirror, and he literally. He's looking at me, and I looked at him, and I couldn't help it. By this point, I just gave him like a smile and a wave. I was like, dude, you need to calm down, kind of. And that pissed him off. He just threw his car sideways, jumped out, ran in front of me. I had to lay my bike down. And my point is he came at me. I ducked under, put him on the ground, wrapped him up. I'm sitting on him. I did a bad triangle from the top. I was a white belt still. And I'm sitting on his chest, and he doesn't do jiu-jitsu, so I put him in basically one of the most submissive positions you could be in, and I'm sitting on his chest, and I got both arms up like this in his head, and I'm like, hey man, you need to calm down. I am not hurting you. I am only defending myself. You need to calm down. And then another guy comes out of the car and puts his hand up like he's going to punch me. And I just put my hand up and I said, look, I'm not hurting him. I'm only defending myself. And he looked at me like he didn't understand what I was saying, started to come at me, and I got off. And I laid on my back. The guy jumps up, comes back at me, and I had just learned De La Hiva. De La Hiva his leg and kicked his other leg, and then he stopped and looked at me, and he had that moment of recognition, this guy knows what he's doing. And the other guy grabbed him, pulled him around the car, and I grabbed my bike, walked around, I just looked at him, I said, hey man, I was like, I just want you to know, I really could have hurt you. And my point of telling it just goes with everything we just talked about is, if I only knew boxing or kickboxing, I would have been like, there would have been blood, there would have been broken bones, there would have been a broken jaw, there would be a police report, there would have been an ambulance. It would be my word against theirs. I would have to get a lawyer. All this stuff was solved by being strong but controlling.
Control, yeah. Well, I think even on a philosophical level, violence begets violence, right? You see the cycle we get caught into. I've had moments where I wasn't as controlled as I wanted to be, and I reacted in a way that I just wasn't befitting of the type of person I want to be, and you're throwing oil on the flames, right? And and it gets big, and you see that I want to one up you, you want to one up me, and then all of a sudden the cycle escalates, and we find ourselves in a broken situation that neither of us want to be in. And so the question is how do we create a different way? How do we flip the script? Like Mother Teresa did, or even in a certain sense, when you kind of neutralizing this person, look, I'm not going to hurt you, I could. I'm going to give you an opportunity to make a different decision where we're both going to leave here physically unhurt. I mean, maybe your ego will be wounded, but that's better than, you being hurt in front of your family.
Yeah.
And so, there was the other day I was going down the street, and I actually, I wasn't paying attention. I cut someone off. Sometimes you accidentally cut someone off. Or maybe you don't. Maybe I'm just a bad driver, but and the person got up righteously. They got upset with me, and they started honking in and laying on the horn, and they pulled up side of me, and they rolled down the window, and I was actually in the fault. I get it. That wasn't an appropriate response to it. And everything in me just wanted to tell them off, curse them off, and be like, But one of my spiritual goals is to be quick to admit my shortcomings. And so I just look, sir, I was wrong. I'm so sorry I did that to you. Please forgive me. Yeah. And he went from screaming, yelling at me to being like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Immediately de-escalated.
There's power in that.
And there's power in
people have respect for people that acknowledge, their faults, because that, what change is. Acknowledgement of your faults is the beginning of changing it,
Yeah.
of changing the problems that
Or
you
as
have.
Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living. Like self-knowledge is so important in all of our relationships. You know, it's so important in religion, right? St. Augustine says, you ask me what the first thing is about religion, I'll tell you the first, second, and third thing is humility. Humility, humility, humility. And this is something we also learn in jiu-jitsu. If you go in there without being humble, you're not going to stay.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're going to have to accept the fact that there are people who have knowledge that you don't. And that they have certain power over you that you don't yet have. You know, and which should be, whenever you get that power for yourself, it should be a means of, okay, I should be humble with this. But how often do we get in a position of power? And rather than using that strength to serve others, right? We even see this in the political order, right? Why do we have politicians? Why do we have presidents? Why in the ancient world did we have kings and monarchies? Well, ultimately, we have to have structures of governance in order to serve the people. But how often when people get in power, they use their position to serve themselves rather than being servants of the people. And it becomes a manipulation and a distortion of power. You know, and this goes down even to the family relationships. Like when people trust me, when people put their lives in my hands, you know, when I became the legal guardian of my sister, you know, or I have friends that are, you know, like they're trusting me. And I ultimately should not use my power for them to serve me, but for me to serve them. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, like, what do we do with power? And I think this is why blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who aren't addicted to power, but rather they use their strength in a humble way, in a gentle way. Mm-hmm. Not excessively, not more than you need, enough in order to uphold the dignity of the human person and uphold the goodness of life.
Absolutely. That was good. Earlier we were talking and you mentioned that you taught dance lessons to someone. I didn't know, I had no idea you were into dancing. What kind of dancing do you?
Yeah, so my first dancing love is salsa.
Okay.
You know, so
right.
whenever I was at LSU, I wanted to learn how to dance because I couldn't wrestle anymore. Like that wasn't as practical, and so I just always thought there was something similar. You know, and you see that even in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. There's a certain rhythm, and there's a certain movement, there's a certain choreography that you're trying to play out in terms of doing your technique. But I always thought like dancing was beautiful because I love art. You know, one of my other degrees is in literature, and the reason why I've always been attracted to art is because I think art has a certain ability to help us reflect on what it means to be human. Yeah, art has this tremendous, I mean, really, it's a cultivation of the human person. It's me trying to express what my humanity needs. And so it has the power to help us to reflect on our humanity, you know, self-reflective. It helps us reflect on our culture we live in and try to find our place. And so I think art is essential to our humanity, to understanding our place in the cosmos. And this is the reason why I love literature, is every time I pick up a book, every book puts forth a vision of what it means, what life means, the meaning of life. And so I can engage in that, I can learn from that, I can reflect on that. It helps me cultivate my humanity. And the same thing with dance, right? It really is it's the physical poetry of the embodied spirit. There's something about two people coming together, that there's a language, there's a grammar, there's a communication, there's a leading, there's a following. Even when I'm leading, I have to listen to her. What is she comfortable with? What does she want to do? How can I respect her body and respect her beauty and make sure she's having fun? It's not about me. It's not about me, but yet being kind of caught up and lost. In fact, this is, you know, even as a Catholic priest, one of the things that in the East they talk about the Trinity is this divine dancing around of the divine persons, right? It's just described as the perichoresis, the dance, the turning around. And that even within God's innermost mystery is this dance, this exchange of love between persons, this communion of persons. And I think this is true of life, that we are supposed to engage in our relationships in a way that there's this beautiful dancing around that respects, that brings forth beauty, and that reveals what it means to be human.
Yeah, that's honestly, that I don't know if I told you this, but that is actually my main concept of this channel, is basically a balance in life, kind of like embracing suffering. That's what I put at the beginning, embrace suffering and appreciate life. And in a way, I say art is an appreciation of life, an expression of life. That is what my channel is about. It's all based, you know, my main quote that I go by is Miyamoto Musashi's quote, every warrior should have a peaceful art as well as a killing art. I mean, you can look at course, you can look at that different ways, each one. But and my killing art is jiu-jitsu, and hence why I have that perspective of being like dangerous but controlling it. You know. And then art, of course, is an expression of life, or a abstraction of life that kind of shows appreciation for it. And my way of doing it, so the underlying theme is really like mind-body mastery, right? So it's like living life to the fullest by being creative and being physically fit.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to talk about the role of suffering in art. Because, I mean, if you think about it, like, anything that's worth doing in this life is going to require some level of suffering.
Yeah.
You know, like when you're out there doing on the mat and someone's, choking you out, or even just the physical exertion sometimes necessarily to be fit, like there's a suffering there. And I think, that willingness to suffer for your art, or suffer for what is beautiful, is actually essential to part of what makes us human. The other night I was reading the encyclical Spe Salve, which means saved in hope, where Pope Benedict was talking a lot about the importance of hope and action, and that, one of the things he was talking about is that one of the beautiful things about modern science is that we do have a certain mastery over the physical world, and even medicine, where we, more so than ever, can help alleviate people's physical sufferings. Now, he says, one of the drawbacks is we have a lot of mental and psychological sufferings that have arisen in this kind of materialistic culture that we haven't mastered, right? So there's other types of sufferings that we're still just as clueless as ever, But one of the things he talks about is that, we shouldn't avoid suffering at all cost. Like, that's actually dangerous. We shouldn't avoid suffering when it comes to upholding truth, goodness, and love. And I think this is a beautiful thing about art, is that when you see the person who's willing to suffer for what is true, what is good, what is beautiful, right, then there's something beautiful about that. We become the artist, right? And one of the things I like to think about, especially in art and human relationships, is that, when I think about the saints and I think about people who are suffering for what is good, like, there's something beautiful about that. Like, their very lives become a work of art. They become hope in action. They reveal a better way to live, and what life, a raison d'etre, a reason for being, right? And so I think this is one of the things that art does, and especially those who are willing to suffer for what is good, true, and beautiful, and suffer for love, they reveal a certain essential quality of what makes us human, what makes us tick, and what makes us keep going on. And so I think of the ethical person as an artist, the moral person as an artist, is that when I do good and when I suffer for what is good, versus think about the person that I'm called to love this person, but I refuse to defend them. Maybe I'm not the oppressor, but like I'm enabling it. I'm allowing it to happen. Like, I become a part of the problem. I become a part of the cycle of violence. And in doing so, my actions, I either bring beauty into the world by upholding what is good and suffering for what is good, or I bring ugliness into the world by a refusal, by a cowardice, by running away from my obligations as a human person to love, respect, and treat with dignity other people. And so I think in a certain sense, are we willing to suffer for what is good? And when we do, we become artists painting a picture of our own lives.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, some would say life is suffering itself. So it's like, and I get this actually from Jordan Peterson as well. He basically says, life is suffering no matter what you're doing, so you might as well do the good thing, because like you're gonna suffer either way.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's intrinsic to other traditions, even like Buddhism, right? To live is to suffer, right? And so, let's get rid of suffering. How do you do that? You get rid of the self. I mean, the Christian response is a little different than that, but I mean, we hold the same premise. To live is to suffer. You're gonna suffer. Everyone's gonna suffer. Yeah. But there's actually a power there. How do I order it? Do I order it towards love, or do I order it towards hate? And when I order my suffering towards what is good, true, and beautiful, when I'm willing to sacrifice for the higher things, I become a better person. I become more beautiful. And people, you see that. You see that in people that you respect and admire. They're willing to suffer for what is true, good, and beautiful.
And that also brings me back to what we were talking about earlier. Before we recorded, you and I were discussing beauty in general. I was talking about how I consider myself an aesthete just because I love aesthetically pleasing things, and there is a thing about a well-made bed, or just a room that is clean, and I'm not sure who said it, but it was along the lines of, divine consciousness. Beauty is the state of divine consciousness, which you can see that in Christianity and in all religions that they have a thing for cleanliness and great architecture, and beautiful things. And I wonder what's your thoughts on that? It's a weird thing. I don't even know how to express it, but it's like something about being in a beautiful place. Yeah, it's like,
even as you were setting up, and there's a lot that goes into, just trying to do this, and you're trying to always find the best way, the most beautiful way. And I think one of the things I was commenting on is, you're apologizing, oh, this is taking a little bit more time than I anticipated. And I was just saying, like, good, because we want to spend time acknowledging the importance of making things beautiful. That the people, sometimes we think about the end. We think about the end product. We want the end product to be beautiful, and we want to get to it the quickest way possible.
Yeah.
But the fact is that ultimately when something is worth doing, we should take our time. We should, in a certain sense, be wasteful with our time. We should take that extra moment to make sure, because there's a certain dignity to that. So I think whenever I am receiving guests and I take extra time to make their bed or make something more welcoming or make sure the colors of the room are warm and receiving, and that, and there's beautiful things around people. That's an aspect of hospitality. That's an aspect of saying, you're worth it. You're worth it, right? I could just, give you a cinder block cell, and just be like, but like, I was saying this, I think it's a problem with our education system, right? We want kids to be well balanced. We want them to, be able to appreciate beauty, but then we put them in these rooms that look like prison cells, and it's just cinder blocked, and it's devoid of anything beautiful thing, and we wonder why it crushes their spirits.
Yeah.
And so, if we want to bring more beauty into the world, the methods we use, there should be a certain integrity. There should be a certain sense of, I'm going to use beautiful means, even if they take longer, in order to achieve a beautiful end.
Mm-hmm. What were you telling me about? You had a beauty crew, or was it?
So I recently
beautification crew?
Did a retreat last year, and I'm going to do another women's retreat this year over at Most Blessed Sacrament. And one of the things I wanted to make sure that the theme of the retreat last year was cherished and nourished, and I wanted to really speak about the dignity and beauty of womanhood. To these group of women, right? They invited me as a guy, as a dude, to come give them a retreat on what it means to be a woman, which is humbling. But I really wanted to, and so, we had our logistics team, I wanted to make sure there was live music, so we had our music team, we had a lot of different teams, but one of the things I implemented was a beautification team. And their purpose was just to go into these spaces and make sure there were fresh flowers, there was hand-painted signs, that everything was beautiful. And it took a lot longer, but I wanted them to know that they are worth it, that I didn't want them to think I just slapped this retreat together. But I wanted everything we did, even in the environment, to speak to their beauty, and that they're worth it. And I think this is one of the things in relationships. This is why we take extra time to do the things that maybe don't seem like they're worth it or they're necessary, because it's really the small things that communicate how important that other person is to us. Mm-hmm. Right? One of the things Mother Teresa said, she says, do small things with great love. Small things with great love. I think sometimes we become so consumed with doing these really big things, being successful. She's like, just focus on being faithful.
I like that. It's great. Training jiu-jitsu today?
I will, yeah. I'm going to go to the lunch class just in a little while.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Not long, not far from now. Well, dude, I appreciate this. This was really good.
Thank you, brother. Anytime.
I really I just feel like we see a lot of things the same way, and I really appreciate your perspective on things.
Awesome, yes. Been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, buddy. Killer. All right, that was running.